I was just scrolling mindlessly through videos, not really expecting anything to catch my eye until I saw them. That couple on the street, sharing an ice cream cone and looking completely in love, was my husband and his college flame. And that shirt he was wearing? I had ironed it for him just the night before. In that moment, I didn't even hesitate. I had put up with this marriage for 40 years, but now I was done. People often underestimate a housewife, but once she wakes up, they have no idea how fierce she can be. It was early Saturday morning when my husband, Dr. Charles Bennett, left the house for a faculty meeting at the college. For Charles, the university was like a second home. As one of Eastbridge College's most respected senior professors, he was never far from his academic world, even on weekends. I'd grown used to his early departures and late returns, just as I'd gotten used to handling everything around the house on my own. That morning, I mopped the floors 3 times, did the laundry, and carefully pressed Charles's shirts and slacks. He was always so particular about his clothes. Everything had to be perfect, no creases, no wrinkles. I'd done it the same way for 40 years, and somewhere along the line, it stopped feeling like a chore and became part of the marriage itself. When I finally checked the clock, it was already noon. I threw together a quick sandwich and started thinking about what groceries I needed to pick up for dinner. It was our 40th wedding anniversary, and Ryan and his wife Natalie were bringing little Liam over to celebrate. Charles couldn't stand the smell of pork. Ryan wouldn't touch vegetables. Natalie was on one of her health kicks. Low fat, low carb, everything bland. Liam had a seafood allergy. Planning family dinners always gave me a headache. I nibbled on my sandwich as I scrolled through Instagram Reels, hoping to find some new recipe ideas. That's when I stumbled on a local video. It showed an older couple standing close on the sidewalk. The woman was holding an ice cream cone, laughing as she took a small bite and then raised it to the man's lips. He smiled tenderly, cupping her hand as he leaned in to take a bite from the same spot. There was something so intimate, so heartbreakingly sweet about it. Their hair had turned silver, their faces lined with age, but the warmth between them seemed so real, like you could almost reach through the screen and feel it. Even the person filming couldn't help murmuring, "God, I hope I find someone to grow old with like that." If I hadn't known them, I probably would have sighed along, touched by that quiet moment of lifelong love. But I knew them. The man wore a crisp white shirt and charcoal slacks, the exact outfit I had ironed for him the night before, my wrist still marked by a welt from the steam. His shoes, polished to a shine? I'd buffed them just that morning. That man was my husband, Charles Bennett, and the woman feeding him ice cream was Vivian Harper, his college sweetheart. Fine lines had appeared around her eyes, but she was still beautiful. She wore a fitted vintage dress that hugged her slender figure, her elegance seemingly untouched by age. I let the video play on repeat, losing track of time, not even noticing the tears until they fell on my apron, smearing a grease stain on my belly. And out of nowhere, another thought came to me. Charles was always so particular about how we ate. He had to use his blue ceramic bowls and dark wooden chopsticks, drinking only from a clear glass. I always used white porcelain plates and light utensils, my tea in a ceramic mug. And heaven forbid we ever mixed them up. When it was just the two of us, he'd even use a spatula to draw a line across the serving dish, dividing his food from mine. If I reached over that invisible line by accident, he'd slam his cutlery down so hard soup would splash in my face. Back then, we lived in a cramped old apartment, the stove always breaking down. Still, I'd clean up the mess and start cooking again, wanting to smooth things over. It wasn't until later, when he was finally eating, that I felt a sharp pain twisting in my abdomen. I had just given birth weeks earlier. I remember sitting there alone, feeling my chest tighten like it was in a vice, my mouth opening but no air coming in. All those memories I'd tried to bury came rushing back like a tidal wave. After our baby was born, Charles and I hadn't shared a bed for 38 years. Kissing was almost non-existent. When we did have sex, it was cold, mechanical, never gentle. I know it sounds pitiful. I used to think that was just who Charles was, distant, emotionally closed off. I thought it wouldn't have mattered who he married. He'd always be like that. But that day, watching that video, I realized I'd been wrong. Charles could laugh. He could hold someone's hand. He could share an ice cream cone that had already touched another woman's lips. All those rules about cleanliness, they were only ever meant for me. I don't know if I cried myself to sleep or just blacked out from exhaustion and heartbreak. When I woke up on the couch, it was already 4 in the afternoon. I could hear Charles's voice from his study, calm, low, academic. I went to the bathroom, washed my face, then put on the nicest outfit I had before going to his study. He was on a video call with a student discussing some theory I couldn't even begin to understand. When he heard the door open, he turned his head slightly and shot me a sharp look, gesturing for me to leave. I ignored it and stayed right where I was. Left with no other choice, he kept going, acting like the patient, thoughtful professor as he guided his student through the conversation. I stood there, studying the man I had lived with for 40 years. His gray hair was slicked back, his gold-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. Time had softened his sharp features, giving him a look of dignity, of refinement. But who would ever believe that this so-called caring, respectable man hadn't even bothered to check if his wife, passed out on the couch, was okay? Charles finally closed his laptop and turned to me, scowling. "What are you standing there for? Ryan's coming over for dinner. You know what time it is. And you haven't even started cooking." "I need to talk to you," I said, stepping forward, closer to his desk. My legs felt shaky, like I'd been standing still too long. I had to grab onto a stack of papers to keep from falling over. Charles's face twisted in annoyance. "How clumsy can you be? You can't even walk straight. Don't touch my files." He reached out like he was going to shove me away, then stopped short, almost as if the thought of touching me made his skin crawl. The awkwardness of that gesture would have been funny if it hadn't been so painfully familiar. That was how he'd treated me all these years. I used to take it, swallow it down, tell myself to smile through it. But right then, for the first time, I felt something else, a deep, boiling anger. "Charles, did you really go to a meeting today?" His face flushed red instantly, and his tone turned sharp, defensive. "Are you accusing me? I've been working my ass off for decades. I'm in meetings every weekend. If I wasn't out there working, you'd be stuck in this house like a damn parasite." And as I looked at his twisted face, everything suddenly became so clear. "Professor Bennett, have you ever stopped to think about how much it would actually cost to hire a full-time, live-in housekeeper? Someone who's available day and night? Because that's exactly what I've been doing all these years. I may not get a paycheck, but I sure as hell work. Let me remind you, back then, I could have gone to college too. I gave that up so you could finish your degree. I dropped out and took on 3 jobs just to support you." Charles clearly hadn't expected me to push back. His lips trembled slightly, and he looked momentarily unsure of himself. "I don't want to argue about this. There's no use dragging up old memories. Just go and make dinner," he said. But I wasn't going to let it go, not this time. I took out my phone, turned up the volume all the way, and shoved the video right in front of his face. His expression flickered. "Elaine, what's this supposed to mean? I just happened to run into Vivian. What did you expect me to do? People love to make up stories." I let out a cold, mirthless laugh. "You mean that so-called coincidence with the ice cream? But Charles, you don't even eat sweets." His eyes went dark, and his voice climbed higher, echoing off the walls. "You've always been so petty. Just like 40 years ago. You never change. I swear to God, nothing happened with Vivian. Stop poisoning our friendship with your sick suspicions." All at once, a deep, tired heaviness settled in my chest. Was this really the man I'd loved? The one I'd stood by for 4 decades? Without another word, I walked into the kitchen, grabbed his favorite bowl and his drinking glass, and carried them back to his study. "You've spent our whole marriage keeping everything in this house separate, down to the plates and cups. But with Vivian Harper, sharing a single ice cream cone didn't seem to bother you at all." I lifted the bowl and glass and smashed them to the floor with all my strength. Shards of porcelain and glass scattered across the hardwood, and Charles jerked back, startled. A small piece nicked my cheek, and I felt the sting as a drop of blood rose to the surface. I wiped it away with the back of my hand and said in a low, steady voice, "For 40 years you refused to eat from my bowl or drink from my cup, no matter how clean they were. so I've broken yours. Tonight, if you have the nerve to lie to me, may you and Vivian both rot in hell." Charles didn't move. He just stood there frozen, staring at me for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he spoke in a voice that was almost eerily calm. "Don't be absurd, it's still early, I'll just go buy a new set." A small laugh escaped me. A so-called esteemed professor, too scared of a simple curse to even offer his wife one comforting lie. The truth was, Charles had never loved me. He'd married me because he couldn't afford college on his own. Me? I'd fallen head over heels for him. I knew I was never beautiful enough to keep his attention, so I clung to my grades to give me some small sense of value. My test scores were better than his ever were, but I dropped out of school, took on 3 jobs, and poured every ounce of myself into making sure he could graduate. For decades, I gave him everything: my energy, my time, my loyalty. In return, he gave me distance, coldness, disgust. And now, he could hold Vivian's hand and eat from her ice cream cone without so much as a second thought. The fire that had burned in my heart for all those years, it finally went out. "We're done, Charles," I said. I walked to the bedroom and started packing quietly, even as his cruel words rang in my ears. "You're 60 years old and suddenly think you're some kind of modern woman who can just walk out? Please, who's going to feed you, clothe you? You're just a housewife. I could hire a cleaner tomorrow who'd do a better job than you. You think you're worth something? You're old. What man in his right mind would even look at you?" Everyone needs a place to vent their feelings. Charles was always the perfect gentleman when he was out in public. But the moment he stepped inside our front door, he turned sharp and cold, always ready with a cutting remark. In his eyes, I was clumsy, slow, plain-looking, and utterly forgettable. But at least I had something he didn't. I worked hard. I was strong. I wouldn't starve on the street. And most of all, I had a lifeline he could never take away from me: my wild, fiercely loyal best friend, Samantha Quinn. Meeting her was the best thing that ever happened to me. Just then, my phone buzzed with a new voice message. I tapped play, and Samantha's voice burst out, bright and unfiltered as ever. "Elaine, I just pulled out of my garage. I'll be at your place in 20 minutes. Want me to bring 2 meatheads to beat the hell out of that old bastard?" I couldn't help but laugh. "I'll wait for you downstairs," I said. "Thanks for taking me in, darling." I finished packing, zipped up my suitcase, and started pulling it toward the front door. But before I could even touch the handle, the door swung open from the other side. There was Ryan, and right behind him stood Natalie and little Liam. Ryan snatched the suitcase out of my hands, his voice instantly sharp and full of exasperation. "Mom, really? You're too old for this kind of nonsense. Dad just got home from work. He's exhausted and now you're putting on this show? Can't you at least show him some compassion?" This son I'd raised with my own 2 hands, who had grown up in a home where Charles's words cut deeper than any knife, had clearly learned the same lessons. To him, his father was a respected professor, the pillar of the family, the man who held everything together. And me? Just a tired, unremarkable housewife in the background. He had long forgotten how, when he was just a sickly little boy in and out of hospitals, it was me who carried him to every appointment, stayed by his side through every fever, held the home together with nothing but my own 2 hands. Natalie touched his arm lightly, trying to caution him with a look, but Ryan didn't back down. He was, through and through, his father's son, arrogant, domineering, and beyond saving. When I didn't say anything, he raised his voice, each word striking me like a slap. "Dad already told me it was just a random meeting with Miss Harper. You're overreacting. I was there. She just said the ice cream was good and offered him a taste. Why are you acting like this is a scandal? Do you even know how long she's been waiting for Dad? She never married because of him. That's what real love looks like. Instead of playing the victim all the time, maybe you should take a yoga class, go to a salon, find something to do, stop drowning in your bitterness. And come on, it's not like Dad doesn't support you. Look at Miss Harper, same age as you, but she's still so elegant, so full of life. And you? You've let yourself go completely. It's not just Dad who doesn't want to look at you. I can barely stomach it myself. You're a grandmother and you're throwing some childish fit about moving out? What do you think the neighbors will say? If my coworkers found out my 60-year-old mother was acting like some lovesick teenager, they'd laugh their asses off. His words cut through me like shards of glass, each one sharper and more hateful than the last. I glanced down at my stomach. The truth was, my limbs were still slender. My face still had its soft, balanced shape. But my stomach, it had never been the same. It started when I was pregnant with Ryan. He'd been positioned so far forward in the womb that my belly stretched and sagged in ways I could never undo. The doctors called it a pendulous belly. The stretch marks ran deep, and my abdominal muscles had torn apart so badly there was a gap the width of 4 fingers. Back then, Charles was finishing his final year of college, busy with internships, job interviews, and endless events with classmates from all over the country. I barely had a few days to recover from childbirth before I was thrown into a life of constant newborn care, dealing with his aging parents and managing the entire household by myself. And as Charles's career took off and his paycheck grew, he started to see my part-time jobs as something shameful, proof I wasn't good enough for the image he wanted to project. That's when I finally caved. I gave it all up and became a full-time housewife. Back then, nobody really talked about postpartum recovery. I was given almost no time to heal properly. Because I had to push through without rest, I ended up with a mild uterine prolapse. It wasn't until years later, when social media became a lifeline, that I discovered yoga tutorials and began following gentle recovery workouts all on my own. Slowly but surely, I started to put myself back together, piece by piece. Deep down, I'd always known my sacrifices meant nothing to Charles, but I kept numbing myself, pretending it didn't matter. I was done fighting. I yanked the suitcase out of Ryan's hands and walked out without a single glance back. Behind me, little Liam started crying, frightened by the tension in the room. My heart ached, but I forced myself to keep walking. Then Ryan's voice cut through the air like a slap. Even without Vivian Harper, my dad would still have options. If you walk out that door, don't think you can ever come back. My eyes burned. How had that little boy, who used to call me mommy in a soft, sweet voice 100 times a day, become the one holding the knife to my heart? I dragged my suitcase down the stairs, my chest tight. A cherry red Porsche glided to a stop at the curb. The window slid down, and there was Samantha, my best friend, my lifeline. Her oversized sunglasses sparkled under the porch light, and her silver gray hair gleamed like moonlight in the dusk. At our age, dyeing it felt pointless. Every strand of silver was a badge of honor, bold, wild, and completely her. She raised a hand heavy with chunky gold rings and gave me a playful wave. "When girlfriends reunite, there's no such thing as problems," she said. "Gas tank's full. Just say the word. Where are we headed?" I couldn't help but smile. Thank God for Samantha. As long as she was around, maybe my life wasn't as hopeless as I'd feared. "Nowhere special," I murmured. "Let's just go to your place first." She lived in a spacious high-rise downtown, nearly 2,000 square feet of open, sunlit space that was all hers. Independent, serene, hers alone. Samantha had never married, and she never once envied anyone else's picture-perfect domestic life. She lived fearlessly, radiantly in ways that put most people to shame. I used to tell her, "A woman needs a man to lean on." She would just laugh and shake her head. Looking back now, the joke was on me. Samantha ordered a massive takeout spread: burgers, fries, fried chicken, and 2 cups of chocolate ice cream, my grandson's all-time favorite. I stared at the ice cream, my mind replaying that video of Charles and Vivian sharing it like a pair of starry-eyed kids. Samantha shoved the cup into my hands, and the coldness snapped me out of it. "This is your favorite flavor," she said. "Eat it before it melts." I took a huge bite, the cold so sharp it made my brain throb. But for the first time in days, my heart didn't ache. After dinner, we cleaned up and collapsed onto her giant, unbelievably soft beanbag couch. We turned on a movie, started talking, and somewhere between laughter and comfortable silence, we both drifted off to sleep. When I woke up, it was deep into the night. I sat there disoriented, realizing there were no chores waiting for me, no breakfast to plan, no errands to run. The night was wide open and unfamiliar. I didn't even know what to do with myself. Samantha woke up soon after. She looked at me, then at the clock, and smirked. "Looks like you're not falling back asleep," she teased. She took my hand and led me to her walk-in closet. "Pick something to wear," she said with a grin. That old outfit of yours? It's killing the vibe. Trash it. I blinked at her. At this hour? Where are we going? She lifted an eyebrow, her lips curling into a mischievous smile. Out, of course. What else is the night for? I hesitated. Samantha, we're two older women. What if something happens? A robbery or worse? She tossed a deep purple velvet jumpsuit into my arms and didn't even blink. Stop whining. Put this on. I just bought it for you. It's perfect. Now hurry up. I'll be in the car. I let out a helpless laugh and shook my head. What choice did I have? She was already halfway out the door. I couldn't let her go alone. What I didn't expect was where she took me. A nightclub. My stomach dropped the moment we pulled up. I followed her out of the car, clutching the edge of her jacket like a child lost in a crowd. I'd never been to a place like this in my life. The moment we stepped inside, a young man, clearly the bar manager, rushed over, a wide grin on his face. Miss Quinn, been too long. Same as always? VIP suite upstairs? Samantha handed him her car keys without a second thought. Of course. Park and wash it and send up a few pretty boys while you're at it. I followed her up the staircase, the thumping bass of the club pounding in my chest. Staff lined the stairs, greeting her like she was royalty. My heart was in my throat. My blood pressure had to be through the roof. What are we even doing here? I whispered. I can't sing, I can't dance, and I definitely don't drink. Samantha clapped me on the shoulder, laughing with that same carefree spirit she'd had since the day we met. Honey, when you're with me, someone else will do the singing, someone else will do the dancing, and someone else will drink the cocktails. All you have to do, she winked, is have fun. We were still talking when the door to the suite swung open and the manager returned, leading in a small group of young men, stylish, confident, no older than their early 30s. Each one looked like he'd just stepped off a magazine cover. Miss Quinn, he said with a grin, here's the best we have. Take your pick. Samantha waved him off. Thanks, you can leave now. The door closed behind him and it was like the cue had been given. The young men moved in smoothly, half going to her, half to me. One with a boyish grin slipped behind me and began to massage my shoulders, gentle and sure. Another sat beside me, offering a tray of perfectly cut fruit. A third leaned in with a glass of champagne, asking softly if I wanted a drink. The boldest of them lifted his shirt just enough to reveal a sculpted chest and said with a mischievous glint, Hey, gorgeous, want to feel how fast my heart's beating? My head spun. Who in their right mind called a woman my age gorgeous? I was probably older than his own mother. I sat there frozen, my hands knotted in my lap, unsure of where to look. Samantha, on the other hand, was doubled over laughing at the panic on my face. She handed me a glass of red wine and clinked it lightly against mine. Elaine, are you having fun? Because if you're happy, then that's all that matters. This life, it's yours. Live it for yourself. In that moment, I felt like I was seeing Samantha all over again. Wild, unstoppable, as fiercely independent as the day I met her. She was the same woman who once pushed her cheating fiancé into a lake and built an empire from scratch. The same woman who turned heartbreak into her own legend. I took a long sip of the wine, feeling the warmth spread through me. I hadn't felt that alive in years. God, it felt so good. I ended up staying at Samantha's place. It was supposed to be just a temporary thing, but deep down, I knew I'd already taken that first step, and I wasn't going back. The morning after our night out, I called a lawyer. The divorce papers were sent to Charles that very day. He didn't respond. Not a word. But I wasn't in a rush. Let him sit with it. Let the weight of it settle in. It was Ryan who called me this time, his voice noticeably gentler. Mom, don't you think it's time to let this all go? Don't you miss Liam? I let out a cold laugh. Don't forget, you're the one who told me that once I walked out of that house, I shouldn't bother coming back. He tried to convince me for a while, but when he realized I wouldn't budge, his tone turned sharp again. What's with this divorce agreement, Mom? Why should you get a share of Dad's house and savings? You planning to run off with some old guy and live off our money? I didn't even flinch. I stayed calm and steady. Believe me, I've been more than fair. After 40 years of marriage, I had the right to take everything, but I didn't. I gave your father a chance to walk away with dignity. I paused, letting my words sink in, then added coolly, or I could just release that video of him and Vivian and watch his precious university deal with the fallout. Let's see who ends up humiliated then. Ryan's voice cracked like a whip, suddenly filled with anger. You're nothing but a bitter old woman. You'll never have the grace Vivian has. Keep playing the victim. When Dad marries her, you'll regret walking out. I didn't bother responding. I hung up mid-sentence, cutting him off. A few days later, it was Natalie who called me in secret. That's when I finally realized why Ryan was so desperate to get me back. Without me, Charles's life had completely unraveled. I'd been taking care of him for so long that he didn't even know how to pour himself a glass of water. He still changed his clothes every day, but the laundry just piled up in the washroom, untouched and sour-smelling. With no one to cook, he started ordering greasy takeout from the diner downstairs. The empty containers built up on the dining table, turning the place into a cluttered mess. At first, Ryan told Natalie to help his father clean up, but he never lifted a finger himself, and Natalie was already overwhelmed trying to juggle everything else. She couldn't manage Charles's disaster zone on top of her own life. Eventually, Ryan hired a housekeeper through an agency to help out, but that didn't go as planned. The woman, probably in her 40s, saw Charles, a professor with a solid pension and savings, and decided she wanted a piece of that. One day, Charles was invited to give a guest lecture out of town, and Ryan stopped by to help him pack. He opened the bedroom door and froze. The housekeeper was sprawled out across Charles's bed. At first, Ryan thought she was just being lazy and went to yank off the covers, only to find her completely naked. I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing when Natalie told me. I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. It was like something out of a bad soap opera. But this time, none of it involved me. Ryan lost it. He called the agency right away and fired her on the spot. And just like that, Ryan was on the phone again, begging me to come back. I simply thanked Natalie for telling me the truth and said I'd drop by to see Liam in a few days, but I wouldn't be stepping foot back in that house. Charles and Ryan had made it painfully clear. To them, I was never truly a wife or a mother, just the most convenient, unpaid housekeeper they'd ever had. The next time I saw Charles Bennett was outside the family courthouse. I was wearing jeans and a beige hoodie, my hair freshly dyed a rich chestnut brown. It was simple and casual, but I felt more radiant than I had in years. Charles, on the other hand, was dressed in his usual academic style, only this time, his white shirt was wrinkled, the collar drooping, sleeves all askew. He never would have left the house like that before. I didn't mock him. There was no point anymore. I just hoped the paperwork would go quickly. I had a yoga session with Samantha that afternoon. When Charles saw me, a flicker of surprise passed over his face. Elaine, you've lost weight. What, can't afford to eat now that you're gone? I rolled my eyes. The weight loss is from a thermage treatment. The glow is good tailoring. Neither has anything to do with you. Men, whether they're 16 or 60, they never seem to run out of ego. What took me by surprise was that Charles didn't snap back. Instead, he looked at me with a forced tenderness that almost made me laugh. Elaine, do we really have to go through with this? We've been married 40 years. We're like two sides of the same coin. You know I'm not good with words, but I never did anything truly wrong to you. Vivian and I, it was just old memories, nothing more. I met his gaze calmly, my voice even. Charles, it's clear you're struggling, but the truth is I'm doing just fine. He looked like he wanted to say more, but at that moment a voice called out, Charles! I turned to see Vivian stepping out of a cab. She was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit with a silk scarf draped just so around her neck. Even at her age, she carried herself with a graceful elegance that was impossible to ignore. She approached us with a soft, practiced smile, as if this awkward moment was just another routine part of her day. Charles floundered, quick to explain. Vivian came to support me. She was worried when she heard about the divorce. You know I've always seen her as a sister. I gave a short laugh. That's familiar. 38 years ago, you said exactly the same thing. So, are you hesitating to sign the papers? Or are you hoping to keep playing that same tired game? Wife at home, mistress on the side? Vivian had always been his college friend. Always just close enough to cause tension, but never quite enough to cross the line. Meanwhile, I was already pregnant with Ryan. For the sake of the baby and Charles's tuition, I forced myself into that marriage and demanded he cut ties with her. I still remember him yelling at me, livid. "You're just a jealous woman. Vivian and I are just friends." From that moment on, he carried that resentment like a grudge. Vivian became his symbol of youth and fantasy, something he could never have fully, but always wanted. And me? I was the stain he could never scrub out, never elegant enough, never refined enough. Vivian's tone was gentle as she stood there, her posture perfect. "Elaine, if I've come between you and Charles, I truly am sorry. I never meant to interfere in your marriage. I just couldn't let go of those old memories." She tilted her head toward Charles, and they shared a look that was almost too tender to bear. I could practically hear what she was thinking. Poor Charles, trapped in a loveless marriage for all these years. Of course, Charles wouldn't show a hint of guilt in front of her. And just as I expected, with one soft look from Vivian, he snapped right back into that smug, patronizing tone. "Vivian, don't waste your breath. She never understood what we had. If divorce is what she wants, then I'll be the bigger person and let her go." Watching them gaze at each other like that, right in front of me, was enough to make anyone gag. But the real comedy came the moment Vivian caught sight of the divorce agreement. Her face went rigid, her calm expression vanishing in an instant. "What's this?" she practically spat. "Why should she get so much of your estate? This isn't fair." I smiled. "What I take from this marriage isn't your concern, Vivian. Or do those sweet memories only hold up as long as there's a healthy bank account behind them?" Her eyes narrowed and her voice turned tight. "No, Charles, don't misunderstand. I'm just worried she's taking advantage of you. You've always been too generous. I don't want her to walk away with everything you worked for." Charles gave her a reassuring nod, his voice dripping with fake warmth. "I know, Vivian. You've never cared about money. We built all this together from nothing. You're not the type to be materialistic." I was so tired of this pathetic performance. "Charles," I said firmly, "either you sign these papers today, or I'll walk that video straight into your department office. Let's see how the faculty reacts to their esteemed professor tossing his wife aside just to chase after an old flame," I said, my voice calm but pointed. I glanced at Vivian, letting my words sink in before adding, slow and deliberate, "Actually, scratch that. Not a new flame at all. Just a ghost from 30 years ago crawling back for one last chance." Vivian's lips parted like she was about to snap back, but she stopped herself, clinging to that image of grace and composure she'd built so carefully. Her face flushed red, her jaw so tight I thought she'd crack her teeth. The only thing I truly appreciated about my entire marriage was how well I knew Charles's weak spots. For a man like him, losing face at the college he'd devoted his life to was worse than death. So yes, I walked out of that courthouse with my divorce certificate in hand and a fair share of his assets. Even as we signed the final papers, Charles was still trying to impress Vivian. "Don't worry, sweetheart," he puffed up, his voice low and self-satisfied. "I can still write papers, lead research teams, money comes and goes, but I'm the real asset here." They walked out side by side, smug and sure of themselves. Vivian turned back to me, her smile dripping with superiority. "You'll regret this," she said softly. "You just lost an extraordinary man." I smiled right back at her, my tone cool as ice. "He's 60 years old. If he's still able to call himself a man, it's probably thanks to little blue pills. But hey, if you're happy to take the leftovers I threw away, be my guest." They both froze, stunned into silence, just stood there, no words at all. Life after the divorce turned out to be lighter and happier than I could have imagined. Samantha wouldn't let me move out. She clung to me like a delighted partner in crime. I still woke up early, but not to cook or iron shirts. Now I started my mornings with a glass of water and a half-hour of yoga, the sunlight streaming across the mat. I tended the plants, brewed tea, and curled up with a book on the balcony while I waited for Samantha to wake up so we could grab breakfast at the diner down the street. We even talked about adopting a dog and a cat, our own free-spirited little senior commune. Suddenly, my days were filled with small joys to look forward to. Charles's days, on the other hand, fell apart piece by piece. He and Vivian quietly registered their marriage. Ryan, of course, was thrilled. He told Natalie in private. Sure, Mom took half of Dad's stuff, but she's too old to have more kids. When she dies, it'll all come back to me anyway. Besides, Dad marrying Vivian is great. She doesn't have kids of her own, so maybe she'll even help me out financially. She's living off Dad's money after all, so she'd better stay on my good side. When Natalie told me this, I warned her to be careful, to keep their finances protected. Vivian didn't strike me as someone who married for love. Her entire demeanor screamed money and status. Only Charles and Ryan still clung to the idea that this was some epic love story that had waited 40 years to be reborn. As the months passed, Charles's life became the kind of drama Samantha and I laughed about over afternoon tea. Their first real fight? It was about Charles peeing standing up and splashing the toilet seat. Vivian was furious. She told him he had to start sitting down to avoid making a mess. Charles blew up. I'm a man. Sitting to pee makes me no different from a woman. Vivian shot back without missing a beat. Then maybe you should take something for your prostate so you stop dribbling like a broken faucet. She didn't even bother to keep it private. She said it during a family dinner with Ryan and Natalie right there. Whatever shred of authority Charles thought he had, gone in an instant. Vivian didn't lift a finger in the house. She sent her clothes to the dry cleaner, demanded restaurant meals every night, and hired cleaning services every other day. Charles's nearly $20,000 a month salary vanished faster than water down the drain. I wondered if, after all the petty arguments and messy days, Charles still looked at Vivian and saw that same perfect dream. The first time Ryan reached out after the divorce was 2 days into a road trip I'd taken with Samantha. His voice was tight with panic. Mom, Dad's in the hospital. He was attacked. It's bad. Can you come see him? Just for old time's sake? I raised an eyebrow. Isn't that Vivian's job now? She's the wife. There was a pause. Then I heard Natalie's voice in the background shouting, It was Vivian's ex-husband and her son who attacked him. I froze. Wait, what? Vivian has a husband and a son? So much for the love of a lifetime. Fine, I said. Send me the hospital address. I'll go. Then I hung up. The second I put the phone down, I turned to Samantha and spilled the whole story. She laughed so hard she was wiping away tears, but she still managed to say, Girl, you have to see this for yourself. This is too good to miss. I laughed too, then turned the car around and ended our trip early, because some train wrecks are just too delicious to watch from a distance. Before I headed to the hospital, I called Natalie to get the full story. What she told me was beyond anything I could have imagined. Vivian hadn't just been married before. She'd been married multiple times, each one messier than the last. Her latest husband was a total wreck, drinking, gambling, picking fights. Vivian decided she'd had enough. She saw Charles as a golden ticket, a respected professor with steady savings and a pension. In her mind, he was her retirement plan. She sweet-talked her husband into a divorce, promising, Once I get Charles's money, we'll get back together. And for a while, it worked. She moved in with Charles, cut off all contact with her ex, and played the perfect companion. But of course, people like her ex don't just fade away. He showed up at Charles's college one day with their son in tow, ready to blow up the whole act. Right outside the lecture hall, he pointed at Charles and yelled, You think you're some big-shot professor? You're nothing but a home wrecker. Then he threw the first punch, and another, beating Charles so badly he ended up bruised, bleeding, and humiliated in front of his students. For a man who lived and died by his reputation, it was a mortal blow. He collapsed right there. When I got to the hospital, Charles had just woken up. He raised his hand weakly, his voice barely a whisper. Vivian, can you get me a glass of water? I sighed, but I still fetched him the water anyway. He took a sip, blinking slowly, and when his gaze finally focused on me, his expression shifted. Shame, regret, and desperation flickering across his face before it went dull and empty. Elaine, he croaked. I made a mistake, a real mistake. Can we go back to how things used to be? I gave him a faint smile. If you'd asked me that a little earlier. His eyes lit up, hopeful. I let him hold on to it for a moment. I would have slapped you across the face to wake you up, I finished, still smiling. But now I'm afraid one slap might kill you, and I'm not about to get charged with murder. He looked stunned, silent, his eyes dropping to the floor. "You weren't like this before," he mumbled, his voice cracking. "You never talked back. You did everything I said." Was I really never like this? I used to be sharp, quick to speak my mind, clear about what I loved and what I didn't. That was the woman who became friends with Samantha. Two souls drawn together because we never liked to play small. I used to love fiercely, give everything to the one I chose, but I chose wrong. Decades of silent endurance had worn me down. Even my sharpest edges had been worn down. I became cautious, always second-guessing my words, rehearsing every sentence in my head before daring to speak. Anything to avoid setting him off. But that wasn't the real me, that was the role women of my generation were taught to play. Be soft, be quiet, be agreeable. Charles kept rambling, tears streaming down his face, unraveling like a man losing his mind. I pressed the call button for the nurse and walked away, never glancing back. Later, Ryan kept calling me over and over, always for the same reason, begging for help. Vivian, it turned out, was doing nothing to care for the man lying in that hospital bed, but she had no problem spending his money like it was her own. The worst part? Her ex-husband and her son had moved right into Charles's house. If it weren't for the bruises Vivian tried to hide, they might have looked like one big, twisted family. Ryan tried to kick them out, but Vivian's ex was no pushover. Ryan didn't stand a chance. The man even made a bold offer. "You want Vivian to divorce me? Fine. Have Charles sign over everything he owns and leave with nothing." As for Charles, his job was long gone. What little savings he had left were disappearing fast, and he couldn't even afford to hire a nurse anymore. Of course, Ryan wouldn't agree to that deal. Now he was stuck in that mess, simmering with resentment, taking it out on everyone around him. Natalie started coming over to see me with Liam, and I could feel it in her. The quiet heaviness in her voice, the weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. I knew what it meant. She was thinking about divorce. Maybe that was for the best. She was still young. She still had time to walk away before it was too late, before she ended up trapped like I had been for so long. And I didn't want Liam growing up learning to treat women like Ryan did. I'd wasted 40 years on a man who never truly deserved me. Time doesn't rewind, and what's lost can't be recovered. But I hope every woman in this world learns to love and be loved deeply and fully. And when that love dies, I hope she finds the strength to walk away, to never shackle herself to someone's indifference. Let my life be a mirror. May yours never have to reflect mine. I always thought she couldn't live without me. I always believed Elaine would stay by my side until the day I died. She was so quiet in 40 years of marriage, she never truly raised her voice. Even when she was upset, she'd offer a few soft complaints, then go right back to ironing my shirts and making my dinner. To me, she was just a housewife, a woman who gave up everything for her family, a woman who didn't have an identity of her own. Her whole world revolved around me and our son. I never imagined she'd leave. I didn't even think she had it in her to leave. What I felt for her wasn't love, not really. It was comfort, familiarity. But the truth is, the woman I dismissed for 40 years turned out to be the stronger one all along. At first, I just thought something was different. She started talking with more purpose, stopped agreeing to everything without question. She changed her hairstyle, dyed her hair, began to dress with a quiet confidence that caught me off guard. I thought it was just a phase, until the day she handed me those divorce papers. That's when I realized this wasn't temporary. Elaine had changed for good. I was shocked, furious. I thought she'd lost her mind. I was her husband, the head of the household. How could she talk about divorce? What had she ever done to deserve a share of my assets? But her eyes that day were so calm, so sure, so final. This wasn't an argument, it was a decision. I tried to stop her, tried to reason with her, saying, "We're too old for this kind of drama." I even pulled out old photographs from our early years, hoping they'd spark something in her. But all she said was, "Charles, I'm done pretending." And in that moment, I finally understood. She didn't feel anything for me anymore. After the divorce, I told myself I'd walked away with dignity. At least I still had Vivian. Vivian was elegant, polished, refined, at first anyway. But life has a way of tearing down those illusions. She had demands for everything. Every surface had to be scrubbed by someone else. Every meal ordered from fancy restaurants, every piece of clothing dry cleaned. She didn't lift a finger to help. Even the hand soap didn't get refilled unless I did it myself. Our first fight was over the toilet seat. I'd left it messy. She told me to start sitting down to pee. I snapped, "I'm a man." She fired back without a second of hesitation. "Then learn to aim or go see a doctor about your prostate." And she said it in front of my son and daughter-in-law. The shame I felt in that moment cut deeper than when I failed to win my scholarship all those years ago. When I landed in the hospital, the only person I wanted to see was Elaine. She came. She stood by my bed, calm and steady, her eyes cold and distant. That's when I truly saw it. She was gone. I begged her to come back. She gave me a small, polite smile. "If you'd asked me sooner," she said, "maybe I would have slapped you across the face to wake you up. But now I'm afraid one slap might kill you, and I'm not interested in a murder charge." After she left, I cried for the first time in 40 years. Really cried. I'd never understood Elaine. She wasn't weak. She was gentle. She didn't stay because she couldn't leave. She stayed because she chose to. But I spent 40 years grinding her spirit down until there was nothing left to give. And when she finally walked away, she took with her the woman who had once loved me completely. What she left behind was a mess I'll never be able to fix. Vivian was never really present, not in the way I'd imagined. All she brought into my life was her ex-husband, her son, and her constant scheming. I became nothing but her personal bank account, lonely, used, and pathetic. Do I regret it? Of course I do. But the cruelest part of regret is knowing that she'll never look back. Elaine is out there living her best life, and me? I'm left with nothing but memories and an endless, bitter sort of sorrow.